that's fine.
Good afternoon and welcome to Live with the Brand. My name is Ken Eifrid and I will be your host in this new and exciting series brought to you by Certified Angus Beef. A little bit about my background. I grew up in Chicago, Illinois, and worked in many different facets of small businesses from digital advertising, insurance, to accounting. But I grew up in the service industry, working in restaurants and bars all throughout Chicago. Then lastly served as a sales rep for a major broadliner in the food service world before joining the Certified Angus Beef brand in 2019. Today, I'm an executive account manager managing the mid-central region, including the great state of Ohio, where we are today. We are live from the Culinary Center in Worcester, Ohio. This building was designed for operators such as yourselves. We've got everything you need to run a restaurant, from 2 full-staffed kitchens. We've got smokers, flat-top grills, ovens, smoky joes, big green eggs, anything you can think of from a cooking standpoint. We've got walk-in coolers. We've got a full-service bar here, meeting rooms, a gift shop, and a full dining hall to my left here. But the best part, which I like to save for last, is our meat lab, which is just behind me and is equipped with rails and hooks so we can break down hanging beef just like they used to do back in the day. Now, normally this building is booked with guests Monday through Friday from all over the world. But given our current climate, we're not able to do that right now. So our goal is to bring those guests to you virtually in this new world. We hope then maybe down the road when things start to get back to normal, you'll come back and visit us. All right, that's enough of my sales pitch. For the next 35 to 40 minutes, we're going to talk to you about the profitability found in the chuck, and in particular, the chuck roll. It is a phenomenal piece of meat with so many underutilized steaks that we hope you'll be able to find useful in this next webinar. We hope you'll take a few menu ideas that you can utilize right now in your operation. And if you trust us with those new ideas, we know you're going to trust us when we talk to you about the importance of high quality premium beef. One housekeeping note, we want this to be interactive. We want questions. There is a Q&A section in the webinar. Please utilize that, submit questions, and we will try to get to those after our presentation here on the chuck roll. Working here at Certified Angus Beef, there is no shortage of meat scientists on staff. I think we've got 10 or so that work for the brand, and they all bring something unique to Certified Angus Beef. But there's probably 2 not as prolific as the Clarks, as they're going by these days. Diana and Daniel Clark, our husband and wife meat scientist team, who charm guests with their knowledge and their wit all the time virtually now, but normally in front of guests here at the Culinary Center. They've got knives in hand and they got meat in front of them, so I'm going to pass it over to Diana and Daniel Clark. Thank you.
We just want to thank everyone really quick for joining and tuning in. And just like Ken said, if you have questions, please ask. That's what we're here for. We want to have some feedback. And with that, Daniel, what do you have for us?
Yeah, so like Ken said, we're going to work on the chuck roll today. And what we have here is actually 2 chuck rolls, because we're going to talk about breaking it down 2 different ways. I think that I'm going to break it down what I would consider more of a traditional way. And Diana's going to talk a little bit about how we can break it down in a little bit of a unique, more exciting way.
I'd say the easy way and the hard way. Just want to throw that out.
Right.
Just want to throw that out there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, what we're going to do here, I'm going to kind of introduce you to the chuck roll to start with, and just get us some groundwork. So first off, this right here, what you can see here, we would have our neck bones laying right across the top of here. Okay. This right here, this muscle, okay, that's an important one. That's called the serratus ventralis. We're going to get into a little bit more about what that can be used for when Diana breaks it down. And then also, very importantly, if you look here, this is actually what sets right up against the rib. Okay, the rib is going to come right across here. The only thing that separates the chuck roll from the rib or the rib eye is a knife cut. Okay, so this end of our chuck roll is very, very similar to a, and I'm going to point this, yep, is very similar to a ribeye steak. This muscle, the circle muscle right there, is actually what is is the longissimus dorsi. Okay, so that's going to be our very tasty muscle. And then we actually have right here is going to be our spinalis dorsi. And if you haven't had a spinalis dorsi, okay, that is the kind of the cap of the rib. Absolutely amazing.
That is like the butcher's cut.
Yeah, that is the butcher's cut. That is the most flavorful, very tender cut, I would say, on the carcass.
And it actually gets larger in the chuck roll than it is in the rib. Okay, so that's pretty cool. That's separated between the 5th and 6th rib. So 5 and forward is our chuck roll, and 6 to 12 is your rib. So you have those same muscles. Now, they don't extend all the way through those longissimus dorsi and the spinalis, but they are sitting right at the front.
Yep. And a couple other things here. We also, when you buy these in, they're going to come in a box, and we have the box right here for you. So the box, something to keep in note, the box has some labels on it. Okay. So we actually have a pack date on there that you need to kind of keep just kind of make note of.
A lot of people, when they have a box come into a restaurant, they end up throwing it away. There's a lot of knowledge that can be found on this. So, I mean, you have the cut itself labeled on there. That's great. But really, this sticker right here is really important because it shows you the pack date, so you know how old it is. Why is that important? Why do you think that knowing the age of the meat, why is that important? That's
absolutely important. When we talk about tenderness, meat ages, or as meat ages, it gets more and more tender.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is really important to know how long it has been aging. So very important for tenderness.
So that 21-day mark is what we consider the savory spot. So you want to make sure that you got at least 21 days of age, and that's what you have with certified Angus beef. It must be aged 21 days before it gets to your door.
Another important thing to keep note of is really the pounds, okay? Chuck rolls will come in about 3, almost always 3 to a box, okay? You'll note this one was actually 84 pounds. So they're typically going to be between 20 to 30 pounds. It's pretty average for a chuck roll for a single one. So that's, again, when you add that up, that's how we have about an 84-pound total box weight. So that's just a little bit introduction to the chuck roll. What I'm going to do now is actually start to break this thing down, okay? And like I said earlier, I'm going to break it down in a pretty traditional way. Okay, I'm not going to do this, but I would say probably traditional, but also the most common way that most people will break these down as well. But before we do that, we need to do a little bit of trimming. And if you can zoom in on this, you can see right up there. Okay, this is actually what we'd call bone feld. Okay, that's not very tasty. Okay, that actually is going to be extremely tough. So before we do anything, we need to make sure we remove all of that. Nobody wants to bite into that.
And that's actually where those feather bones sat on the animal. So part of those ribs. So that's why you have to get in there. In between your bone and your meat, you're going to have that membrane. Again, it doesn't really break down under heat. So that's why you want to remove that. And as Daniel was saying before, this is definitely the traditional way to break down the chuck roll. Found a lot in retail. We really don't see this used too much in food service. And that's really why we want to bring it to you guys, because there's just so much potential here. Even if you're just fabricating it this way, there's a lot of potential.
Absolutely. And then before I flip this over after I've taken the bone felt off the other side, you need to check both sides, because actually the blade bone sits right on top of this. And that blade bone also has a little bit of bone felt attached to it. So that's what this right here is. So I need to go ahead and take that off. And again, really that bone felt is just, it's like chewing on leather. You don't want that in there. A lot of connective tissue. So once we get that off of there, we're going to go ahead and just break this thing down. Now, like I said earlier, this end, okay, that's connected to the ribeye makes some fantastic steaks. Okay. So before we do anything, we are going to want to save a couple of what I would call kind of our chuck eye steaks, right? Okay, we can cut a couple of those off.
They're gorgeous.
Yeah, make some. I mean, these guys are going to eat up fantastic, right? It's got remember that muscle I said that's in there, that spinalis muscle that's extremely tasty. Okay, so that's going to be really good right there. We can charge a little bit of a premium for that. Now the rest of this is really easy. We're just going to go ahead and cut this thing up into pieces, okay, and make some chuck roast.
Now, what can we do with some of those big old chuck roasts?
Oh, you put this in a smoker and you let it slow cook for a little while. Fantastic shredded beef. One of my favorites.
I actually prefer it over brisket, not gonna lie. We usually put a mustard on it and then salt and pepper rub. You let it sit in the smoker for about 4 to 6 hours. And then after that, we'll pull it out. We'll put it in a hotel pan, put some saran wrap and aluminum foil over that hotel pan to trap that heat in. And then we just let that cook overnight. It is incredible. Think about a Boston butt, but with beef flavor. So you know it's gonna taste that much better.
Yeah. So basically I'm done. Okay. I've what I would consider is added a little bit of value to this. I've cut it up into my chuck roast and my steaks. Okay. Now, what I think Diana's going to do next is show you a different way. Okay. Again, this is perfectly acceptable and perfectly fine, but there's so much more here if we actually break this down a little bit more.
Yeah. So here is another chuck roll. Okay. Now we could easily just go in. I'm going to walk you guys through this step by step. And we're also going to send you a merchandising guide too, to help you fabricate this in-house. So again, like Daniel talked about, that chuck eye right here, that's my indicator of where I'm going to cut first. So I'm going to come in and actually roll off my chuck eye roll. I just need to seam this apart a little bit. And I jokingly said, just to like push in his face a little bit, that I'm doing the harder fabrication. This really isn't hard. I'm just following seams. I mean, really, you just find some tension and you pull and separate. It's really not challenging at all. We've had quite a few guests come into our culinary center who've watched us break this down in the back, and then they've gone home, bought it themselves, and were able to cut it within a day. I mean, they didn't have to have any training on it. It's very intuitive when you just are following those natural seams. And again, we have that step-by-step guide that will really help you guys walk through this, and it makes it a very simple process. But notice that I'm continuing to pull with my left hand here as I cut just with the tip of my knife. Okay, that's something that you need to be cautious of. I think a lot of people really grab their knife. You definitely want to act like you're going to be doing something with it. Okay, you want to have a little bit of force to your blade, but you're only using that front edge of your blade. You don't need to cut super deep. Okay, you just follow that seam, and as you pull apart, you expose, I call it the web, because you kind of see where that web is created, and you just cut there and then continue to pull back down on this. And now I am about to separate my chuck eye roll from my underblade. Okay, and this is that first step, and I honestly think that that's probably the most challenging step right there. Not too bad, huh? Not too bad. So now that we have these two pieces, all right, chuck eye roll, your underblade, we're gonna first, let's see, which one do we wanna focus on first? Let's go with the chuck eye roll, okay? So first things first, I'm gonna cut this little edge off here. You could use that in grinds if you want to. There's more fat in there than anything. So I'm just gonna sit this to the side because we will have trim. We'll show you guys that trim too. And looking at this, I'm gonna do the same thing Daniel did. And I'm gonna cut some chuck eye steaks off of this. This is one thing that you guys at least need to walk away from this training with. If you go to a retail store and you see chuck eye steaks, buy them, okay? Because they are going to be cheaper per pound and they're gonna eat like a ribeye. Please, at least take that tip from us when you guys go to pick out your steaks for this week, all right? And now that I cut those, usually you can get about 2 to 3 of those per chuck roll. It kind of just depends on how it's cut. But those just look fantastic. I gotta cut the tail off of there just from a presentation standpoint. But we have those beautiful chuck eye steaks right here. I'm gonna pass these over to Daniel so you can have those, all right?
And those will just eat just like a ribeye. Those are gonna grill up. You could easily do a center of the plate application right here with these very easily and just put it, I mean, just like you would a ribeye.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, a great way. And in reality, this right here could pay for a lot of your chuck roll.
In fact, so we actually had a chef by the name of Craig Deal. He was in Charleston, South Carolina. He would purchase chuck rolls and sell these on a menu and would pay for the entire thing.
So the rest of this just becomes gravy. Like,
Yeah,
it's just
profit.
little extra puff.
Yes, yeah. And the greatest part is how much different things you could do with this, okay? So now I got this chuck eye roll, okay? I've already kind of got my chuck eye steaks there. I'm gonna leave those alone. And now I'm gonna cut a little bit wider. So about 2 inches wide here, okay? I'm gonna cut those down. I'm gonna do another one right here. And this is when we're gonna do something. We're gonna play off the pork community a little bit. And we're gonna go ahead and make some boneless country style short ribs. These are incredible pieces of meat. I'm gonna go ahead and split it all the way down just because from a display standpoint, these just eat amazing. I mean, braising these is definitely an option, but the cool part is we had a guest that was in not too long ago, and they really wanted to try these, and we were in the back fabbing, and they had to leave soon because their flight was coming. And I told them, you know, we really don't have time to cook these all the way. I'm like, well, I don't really care. I just want you to throw them on the grill. That's all I want. I'm like, oh, all right, well, sure, we can do that. They're probably going to be chewy. Like I was trying to let them know, like, it's fine. I just want to get the flavor. And so we grilled these, cooked them to about a medium, and sliced those. And they ate incredible. I mean, they were really, really good. It had some good age on it. It was probably closer to the 35 days of age for that chuck roll, but they were good grilled, and I was surprised by that. But this is definitely more of your slow braise item is what I traditionally would do with this, but just a great sharing dish too that you could have for a table, just something to think about. And I think we'll have some more ideas coming to you before the end as well.
So what's I think really cool about it is you've now, just by the first two cuts that you've done, you've made a center of the plate option, and then that's a steak, right? And then another one here that could be kind of like a shredded application or an appetizer or something. So we've already got two completely different cuts, and we've only made two different things.
Yeah, and I mean, speaking of that too, I mean, you could take that and put it into so many different things. In fact, okay, so now this, chuck roast. You can leave this like whole and roast it. This is usually about the size that we would throw it into our smoker. It's about this big that we covered in that mustard, salt, and pepper. But if I take this just from a presentation standpoint, I love doing this. It just looks really pretty if you butterfly it, and then you could tie this up and roast that whole. Now I know no individual person will eat this whole entire thing. That's definitely not what we're saying. But from a roasting standpoint, you could easily use this as a shredded beef application, and you could put it into pasta. You could put it into your mac and cheese. You could put it on salad topper or anything like that. I mean, you could add this into it and just add a little bit of protein into some of those dishes. I mean, that way you're only using 3 to 4 ounces of product, but you're getting a lot of use out of this. Or ground beef. I mean, ground chuck is incredible. That's my go-to when I'm working with grinds. I want to have that 80-20 blend, and that's exactly what our chuck roll is that 80% lean, 20% fat. So we want to utilize this in many, many ways. I mean, grinds or roasting, either one would work great.
So what also is cool about this is, let's say that maybe you don't have, the cut before this would have been the boneless country style short ribs that she made, right? And maybe you don't have an application for that on the menu, but you do have something for ground chuck. Well, you don't have to put the boneless country style chuck short ribs on there. You could just go ahead and use those and make a couple a chuck roast, right? So you could do you don't have to make all the different ones that we're making today, but we're kind of break it down the most you can to show you all the different applications.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. And so now we're left with this underblade. Okay. So we're going to do a little bit more fabrication here. So first I'm just going to trim this off a little bit. You have a little bit of that silver skin that's on here, which is okay, but we all know what silver skin is. It's chewy stuff, and we really don't want to eat chewy stuff. We want to get rid of that. Now, if you're slow cooking something, that chewy stuff will definitely break down and become gelatinous goodness. But in this cut that I want to pull off next, I don't really want to slow braise it. I'm going to show you guys exactly what I'm talking about. So you can start to see we have these muscle striations that are going down like this. That is the cut that I'm looking for, that I'm trying to pull out. Okay, so you can just see how that's flowing down, and I'm just going to nick with the top of my knife right in here, and I'm going to start to pull back on this cut right here. So this is actually called the splenius muscle. Not too marketable from a name standpoint, I don't think. But NCBA, National Cattlemen's Beef Association, so they have this beef innovations group that came up with a bunch of different names for all of these kind of unique hidden gems, I like to call them, throughout the animal. And this one they actually call the Sierra steak. I don't mind it. I don't really know much about Sahara Desert, but you know, it's still it's an okay name. It's an okay name. I love NCBA though, so I never would want to badmouth them or anything like that because they do fantastic work on so many different levels. But if I were to name this cut, I would call it the chuck flank. Simple. I mean, it looks like a flank, but it comes from the chuck. Why do we have to make it confusing, right? Just call it the chuck flank. The beauty of this, no one really does have a name for it or a recognized name. So call it whatever you want in your restaurant. I mean, if you want to call it the chuck flank, great. Just put Diana Clark after it. Gosh, that's my maiden name. I haven't said that in a while. My husband's probably really worried right now. But looking at this chuck flank, this is just a fantastic cut to utilize just like a flank steak. If you notice, it is just a little bit thicker than your usual flank, but same muscle pattern. So you could use this as a carving station as well. It takes up a marinade really, really well. I've usually given this to the chefs and just said, hey, prepare this to what you think would be best. And they usually will do a bourbon sriracha marinade on that and slice it thin against the grain, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, and you can see the flank steak has kind of that coarser muscle pattern, muscle striations. This does too.
Yeah.
It's hard to see on video, but you can really see those muscle striations going just one way, and cut this, and it's going to eat very similar to a flank.
Meaning you don't need to have a lot of experience for that carver to know. I mean,
Yep.
they can just go ahead and slice that against the grain and be good to go.
Yep, that is key. Always cut it against the grain.
Mhm.
That's very important.
And so now we've got this underblade here, and we've got two muscles left on it. There's some little muscles that we're going to trim up there at the end, but you can see this guy's kind of hanging off to the side, and then you have this right here. So I'm first going to cut off this one hanging off to the side. This is that rhomboideus muscle, also known as the neck hump. Again, neither of those are very marketable. And this is not a cut that NCBA came up with a name for. So this one's in your wheelhouse. Whatever you want to call it, you can call it. But what we've done with this here is made some incredible, I say we, I don't do any of the cooking. All of our chefs do. We have 6 chefs on staff, by the way, that are incredible at cooking beef and anything else that you want them to prepare. They're just amazing. But they have made these fantastic chicken fried steaks.
Chicken.
Sorry. Country fried steaks. That I just lost some money in my paycheck because I said that. I apologize. But these are incredible pieces. This piece can definitely be utilized for that. You would just cut some of these like this, and then you could pound them down, and then you'll just bread those, fry them. Now, Chef Brad, I will have to say, has made this incredible appetizer where he made chicken fried steak. Gosh dang it, another one. Country fried steak nuggets.
That was probably one of my favorite things that I've had here. It was absolutely amazing.
So what he did was cut these little pieces of them. So he kind of split these in half. He might even split them in half again. But then he breaded all of those, fried all of them, and then served them as a platter on a platter of white gravy. It was amazing. People ate that within seconds. I mean, they were just dunking it in and putting it in their mouth. It was fantastic. They were supposed to go to dinner that night, but hardly anyone had an appetite after they were eating that. Okay, so that is that rhomboideus muscle or that neck hump. If you can't use it for those chicken fried steaks, if you don't want to take the time to pound it down, stewing it is another great option. Also, in Australia, it's actually very popular to smoke this because they usually have different breeds of cattle there that have larger neck humps. And that is another discussion on a different day.
So one thing that you don't want to do with that is just put it on the grill. It's got too much connective tissue in there. You got to put a little bit more cooking preparation and put a slow cook or do something different to it. Putting it on the grill is going to make for a very poor eating experience. It needs to be cooked like we've talked about, made into some cube steak or country fried steak or stew meat would be here. Yeah, there's all sorts of different applications. Putting on the grill is not one of them.
Yes, I completely agree with that. And so now what we're left with that underblade, I'm going to come in here and just remove, this is a little bit of that neck meat that was kind of left on there. I'm going to trim this guy up a little bit. This would be great for grinds. Or if you did want to, again, make a little bit more of a stew. But what I'm doing is getting this serratus ventralis exposed. Now, that is just a fantastic muscle. Some of you may know the serratus ventralis by name. Other you may not know it by name and may be more familiar with short ribs. So your chuck short ribs, your plate short ribs, those are all serratus ventralis cuts, or your chuck flap. Did you know that the chuck short rib and plate short rib actually are pretty much the exact same cut, minus just the rib location? So your chuck short ribs have 4 ribs on them. They're cut from the 2nd through the 5th rib, while your plate short ribs, they have 3 ribs on them, and they're cut 6th, 7th, and 8th. So very similar to our ribeye and chuck roll, where it's just a knife mark difference. That's just great for you guys to know as you're looking at menu options or pricing. Sometimes those plate short ribs can get a little expensive, but a great alternative is your chuck short ribs. Or if you're just looking for a boneless short rib, this is another opportunity here to use this as a boneless short rib application.
It literally is the same muscle, right?
Yeah.
We've done tests on this. We've given it to many people to see if they could taste the difference between the underblade if you slow cook it and roast it versus if we take short ribs and use the same application.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's the same muscle, they taste the same. Okay,
Yes.
They taste very similar. So this is another option that you can get right off the chuck roll, same application. More profitability or more options here with this.
So you can see here, we've got some of our muscle fibers going in different directions. You can do this anyway, but I feel like there's always that deeper groove right there. So what I'll go ahead and do is split this right there, kind of down the middle. And now I know I'm gonna be able to cut these against the grain and cut some of these, what we call, I'm gonna come back a little bit, are Denver steaks,
Now,
okay?
if you're cutting the Denver steaks, one of the key things here is you generally, when people think steak, they think 1-inch thick steaks, right? That's kind of typically what you think of. The Denver steak is the opposite of that. Thinner is generally better. We want these to be cut 1/4 of an inch or less. Okay, if you cut them really thick, like a normal ribeye or something like that, they're gonna be tough. So we would not recommend cutting them 1 inch. It's got to be 1/4 of an inch or less. And you can see that is how Diana has cut them there.
And the other thing to think about too is what temperature to cook them to. So these perform much better at cooked to more of a medium degree of doneness. You don't want to undercook these because they will break down better if you do cook them to a medium. So we're going to do that with those. And then I'm going to go ahead and still just cut more Denver steaks out of this portion right here as well, just to kind of show you guys what we have to work with.
What's fun about the Denver steaks, or one of the fun things in my opinion about the Denver steaks, is it's really, I would consider it pretty underutilized. Not everyone has heard of it. So if you want something on a menu that is just kind of new or exciting, that it's something that your guests are going to come to you just for this experience, the Denver steaks would be a great one. Okay. And all they really need is some salt and pepper, put them on a grill. Great. Or you can do some other cool, fancy things. You can put some type of marinade on them and really make them different, have some different flavor profiles. That is great too. But it's just something I would consider more of a new and exciting cut that your guests might only get at your restaurant.
Yeah. And I mean, imagine short rib flavor, but in a steak bite.
Yep.
And that's what you have with these Denver steaks. I mean, they're just incredible.
So,
always marbled really, really well too.
We have a lot of times when we would bring guests here, we would actually do a cooking competition with them where we'd give them different cuts to choose from. And they actually, one of them might be the Denver steaks, and one of them might be, let's say, the Terrace Mage or a ribeye or something. Generally, the Denver steak would be a big winner. Okay, we'd ask them to vote after they got done preparing their dish. Everyone loves a Denver steak. It's
just something that they haven't tried, and it's unique and different. And so something that we also do a little bit here at Certified Angus Beef is some research, either working with some partners like NCBA or just some internal research as well. And we've recently seen, I know that from a restaurant standpoint, right now you guys are looking to kind of decrease your menu. Some of you may not, some of you may be doing okay, but others might just need to decrease it. Just given everything that's going on, it's kind of hard to keep a huge inventory when you really don't know what the next day is going to bring. That's the beauty about this cut though, is because it is just one item, but you have so much versatility within that item. And people are looking for versatility. When they go to a restaurant and they look for a steak, they want to have options. They want to feel like they made that decision. And so this is a cut that gives you that. It gives you so many different options to work with when you have just one piece. So you only have that one piece, but you can break it down. You can get those Denver steaks, the chuck eye steaks. You have roasting items as well. There's just a lot of versatility within this cut. And hopefully you guys can easily see that as we've broken this down here today. Do you have anything else we want to add?
No, I think that I think showing some of the dishes would be good. Basically, so you talked a little bit about the research. Do you remember kind of what percent of folks had like the different types of options, I guess?
So it was close to 70% of people that would rather have that versatility on the menu than not. So they'd rather have those different types of cuts to choose from than go into a restaurant and say only having your filet and that's it, or only having a ribeye. They want to see these different cuts on the menu. And that was just recent research done in October. So that's just really cool to see that that people are wanting to try new things, and especially now. And now more than ever, people are looking for quality. Okay, they're sacrificing in other areas. They're not traveling as much. So when they do go out, they want to have a high quality meal. And that's what's provided to us here with using certified Angus beef when using the chuck roll too. And all of this trim still can be utilized. I mean, you can utilize this for grinds. Even in this case too, you can utilize it for grinds, or better yet, I would take this beef fat and you could render it down and make a great beef tallow butter with that. Oh my gosh, you just add some herbs into it and it's just a fantastic option to have here. So if you guys have any questions, please continue to feel free to enter them in. And I think we're gonna go into a little bit of Q&A right now.
Absolutely. Man, you guys sure made short work of that chuck roll there. Di, you said something along the lines of no single person could eat that chuck roast. That sounds a little bit like a challenge to me. But...
I mean, if you want to go for it, I'll challenge you on it. I might give you a t-shirt too, if you
okay.
do it.
Well, I do have some questions. You know, one of the concerns that I can see coming up from an operator's standpoint is the labor involved in breaking down this chuck roll. And Di, you know, make sure you full disclosure. How many chuck rolls have you say you've broken down in your time with certified Angus beef?
Quite a few, yeah.
Right. Probably in the hundreds, if not maybe the thousands.
Yes, yeah.
So give the audience a little understanding of how long it takes to break that down and how they can feel confident in doing it once they get to that point.
Yeah, so to be quite honest, we've even had guests here that had never broken it down before. We set chuck rolls in front of them to break down, and the first time will take some time. I mean, it will take maybe about 20 to 30 minutes if they're really just focusing and trying to figure out where those seams are. But the more you do it, the easier it's going to be. And we've actually I've had quite a few chefs that have gone through, and after they've been here, they've ordered those chuck rolls and they started breaking them down, and then they send me text messages of, hey, am I doing this right? And they nail it every single time. It's not even a question. They just know where to follow those seams. Those seams are really big and just simple to do. So I would say that it's pretty easy to break down. Daniel just joined our certified Angus beef team a little over a year ago. Did you break this chuck roll down like this before?
No, this is something I definitely learned here. And that, I mean, you're exactly right. It really is an absolute easy one to learn how to break down. And just, that's the other part of it is you don't have to break it down into all of these pieces every single time that you do it. There's a little bit, you can kind of customize it. If maybe you only want the chuck eye steaks, the Denver steaks, then you can make the rest of it a chuck roast. Yeah, that's fine. And it makes it a little easier to cut. Takes a little bit less time.
Yeah. And the beauty of it too, if you do make a mistake, it makes great grinds. It still can become stew. It still can become a roasting item. Just because you make a little bit of a mistake's not that big of a deal. And the price of a chuck roll, it's not a big deal to make a mistake on. You can do that and not feel bad about it. You might not have a high quality cutter there all the time. Your chuck roll can handle that, okay? It can take that disadvantage, and that's great. I know a lot of you are probably struggling with labor right now, so adding the daunting task of breaking down a chuck roll might be frightening, but once you get the hang of it, it's really, really a simple thing to do. And from a price standpoint, you really cannot beat it. It's just a great cut to use.
Another question that came through was on that chuck eye steak, there tends to be a lot of fat, a lot of kernel fat, which you would see on a ribeye too. Does that fat break down when you're cooking that steak?
Yeah, go ahead. You gonna answer that?
So it does to an extent, right? The ribeye, as you cook a ribeye, it's going to break down a little bit. You're going to lose a little bit of the fat, that kernel fat specifically, but you're not going to lose all of it. Same thing on the chuck eye steaks. Are actually, like I said earlier, the chuck eye steaks are literally cut right beside the ribeye. They are in essence almost the same thing as a ribeye. Very little difference.
Yeah.
So just what you'd see with the ribeye is going to be the exact same thing you'd see with the chuck eye steak.
The beauty of it, since you're removing, when you do pull off that chuck eye roll, you're going to be able to remove some of that fat in there anyways. So you're going to be able to remove that part. But why don't you tell them about our marbling and our fat? Kind of what makes it a little bit more unique, I would say.
Yeah. So what is, in my opinion, one of my favorite things to talk about with certified Angus beef marbling is that we actually have, because one of our specifications is it has to have at least a modest degree of marbling, it being the carcass, right? Has to have at least a modest degree of marbling. That it has more marbling than most other cuts that are out there, most other carcasses that are out there. Okay, that's a key part of our brand. And because of that extra marbling, it actually has more oleic acid. Okay, not only in the marbling, but also in all the fat depots. Okay, we have more oleic acid. Now, oleic acid might seem like kind of a foreign term to most, right? That's kind of scientific-y, you could say.
We get really excited about it.
We do like those kind of sciencey words, but oleic acid is just a simple word for basically tastes excellent.
Yes.
Okay, it tastes amazing. And that's why, a couple of reasons why really any products that we get from the certified Angus beef brand taste the way it does is because it has more of that oleic acid. That's why you can distinguish our products from others.
Yeah, that's a great point.
So another question was, what was the second cut called behind that chuck eye steak?
So behind the chuck eye steak, we actually cut I call them the boneless country style short ribs. Essentially, that's how they use it in pork, where they'll just take that, that's right behind on your Boston butt, where they'll take that and butterfly it out. That is a boneless country style rib in pork. So we do the same thing in beef. And that's what we called it here.
Another question came in. It says, is the research published or is it in-house research? I think they're talking about the NCBA that you were referencing.
Yep. So that one research is published. I actually think NCBA just put something on their website within this past week. But if you reach out to us, we'd be more than happy to share with you that information. Just how customers are looking for that versatility and overall quality when it comes to eating a steak. So definitely can share that with you.
So guys, if somebody wants to have a Denver steak, which, I mean, it looks like an awesome cut, and you guys definitely talked a lot of great things about it, but they don't want to go through the labor of breaking down the chuck roll, are there other options for them on that?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, the chuck flap is where it's at. The chuck flap is basically just a little box, okay? A little box of meat, you could say, or a cube of meat. You can take that, cut it into those 1/4-inch steaks, extremely high yielding. There's really nothing to it other than it's just a box of meat, okay? You don't have to really do any trimming, any extra stuff. You just cut it into the Denver steaks, you're ready to go.
Yeah, and then if you don't want to do steaks, maybe you have it on, you're purchasing it throughout the whole year. Maybe over the summer months, you do it into steaks, and over the winter months, you cube it into boneless short ribs. So you have that versatility, and it's a smaller cut, definitely higher price point than your chuck roll, but still has that great option and a higher yield. I would say your overall cut yield on this, and if I'm utilizing this for grinds too, would be 80 to 85% cut yield. Again, that chuck flap would probably be 100 to 98%. I might say you might need to do a little bit of trimming on it, but yeah.
Not much.
Yeah.
Another question, the bone fragment that was referenced on the chuck roll coming from the Packer plant, why do you see that on there? And is that related to what's happening at the fabrication floor of a packing facility?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. Like you'll see that on there regardless of what's happening during the year. You're going to see those bone fragmentations or that bone feld on there too. It's just the high speed chain that things are moving at. I mean, if you ever have the ability to go to a packing plant, I highly, highly recommend that you do. You have a bunch of people with knives standing fairly close together, and they're moving very, very fast. So usually at a large scale packing plant, they're going to harvest about 5,000 head of cattle per day. So you can imagine how quickly they're going through things. That's about 100 head of cattle per 20 minutes. So they might miss a bone fragment or two in there. That bone feld is always going to be on there because they're going to peel off those bones and it's just kind of stuck to the meat. They're not going to take the extra time to trim that. So that's regardless if we're in COVID times or not. But you definitely will find that. So always, always, always look over your product before you go ahead and cook it. Because the last thing you want is someone biting into a piece of bone.
Yeah, that bone feld is actually just a layer of connective tissue that sits between the bone and the meat. Okay, it's what kind of almost like holding things together. So when you go to pull that out, you're going to leave that layer of connective tissue. And like you're saying, it's inevitable, and you need to take it out every time.
Yeah, for sure.
Daniel, another question that came here says, what is the average size of the spinalis that's found in that front end of the chuck roll?
Ooh, per ounce. I would say that's a pretty challenging question. So it's not very big. I can tell you that. What would you say?
I would guess 10 to 12 ounces total.
Yeah, it doesn't go very far back into the chuck roll. It goes maybe, I would say, the first 3 to 4 inches probably, and then it kind of tapers off pretty quickly. And typically, I don't know if I've really seen anyone take that off of the chuck roll.
No,
most
cook it
common.
separate.
What?
And cook it separate.
Yeah, and cook it separate. Yeah, most commonly, people, if you're going to remove that, you're going to take it off of the rib. Okay, you're going to make some rib fillets, and then you can have your spinalis where you pull that off of that. So that's probably the more common way that you would see that done. Not so much. You'd leave it on the steaks typically.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah.
It's kind of just your extra piece, you know.
Kind of along those same lines, is 3 the average number of chuck eye steaks that you pull from a chuck roll?
That's what we've seen. There's a few times where we've gotten 4, but you could definitely go past that. But I wouldn't, just from an eating quality standpoint, that it starts to get a bit more chewy as you go a little bit further down. So that's why I'd usually stop at about 3.
Yeah, that both the longissimus, that sciencey words again, sorry, but both those longissimus muscle, which is that the main muscle of a ribeye and a New York strip steak, only goes in about 3 inches into that chuck eye. So that's why you're going to need to stop that. So both the LD, or that maiden rib muscle, and the spinalis are going to taper off pretty quickly in the chuck roll.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Well, I think that's it on questions. Diana referenced our chef team. There's 6 chefs on staff here at the Culinary Center. And Chef Ashley and Chef Brad just prepared some amazing looking dishes. And they are by far probably our most popular employees at Certified Angus Beef. I think you'll see why here when we show you these plates in front of us. They did an incredible job plating all those cuts that Diana and Daniel just pulled out of that chuck roll. They've got a little something for mac and cheese. They've got tacos. They've got Sierra cut here. If we can take a look at this, it is absolutely phenomenal.
And so what we did was just break down a chuck roll for them and gave them all the pieces and said, all right, have fun. And this is what they created. I mean, so there you could just see the versatility that you'd have on the menu just with these cuts. And you'll notice that the cuts themselves, the raw cuts, are close to the actual plated items. So you kind of get those ideas of what goes well with what. And really, guys, if you have questions on this of what they did, please, please, please reach out to us, because they'd be more than happy to help provide some of that information, just to give you guys a little bit, some ideas to move forward with. But man, does this smell good.
Yeah,
I feel bad that you guys can't smell this right now.
We should have done this before lunch, I think.
Yeah, I know. I agree. Gosh.
But just want to take a second here and talk a little bit about the profitability found in a chuck roll. So in case you guys didn't know, Certified Angus Beef does not own any beef, does not own any cattle. We are not involved in the monetary transaction. That is done by our food service distributor partners, and they're going to control the pricing, and it's going to depend on what they purchased it for and also what type of service they're providing the operators out there. But what I will say is, with the average price we're typically seeing on chuck rolls is around that $4 per pound mark. So think about it, $4 per pound in all of those cuts that they just pulled out of that chuck roll. Now, typically that chuck roll is going to range around 25 to 28 pounds per piece, and usually you'll see about 3 of those in the case, which they were referencing on that box before. So that means roughly $100 per piece, and give or take $300 for the cost of that box of beef. Now, the key is merchandising everything, like Diane and Daniel just did with that cut. And so using a menu, having a menu idea for each and one of those is really the way to get the best bang for your buck out of that chuck roll. So going by some weight measurements here, we saw an average about 5.5 pounds of Denver steaks pulled out of that chuck roll. And so what we did is we came up with some menu pricing to give you a rough estimate of how you guys can sell these. We thought these were pretty middle of the road. I would say a little conservative on pricing coming from Chicago. I see how high steakhouses can charge for some cuts. But we said if you can get $18 for those Denver steaks, cutting them at a 6 to 7 ounce, just based on the cut size that Daniel was talking about, I think that's pretty reasonable for a certified Angus beef boneless short rib Denver steak. You could also use that as a surf and turf item because it is a smaller and get even a higher amount of money on that item. For the Chuck Delmonico or the Chuck Eye steak, we had about a little over 1.5 pounds, and we were selling those at $23 for a Chuck Delmonico steak. Again, I think that's pretty conservative for an 8-ounce steak. Out of the Sierra or the Chuck flank that Diana was talking about, we had a little over 2 pounds on that cut. And some great menu ideas with that. It could be a steak salad using a 6-ounce portion, or also a steak sandwich following a similar portion. And we had that marked around $16 on a menu. We had about 4 pounds of chuck roast. Great, especially this season right now. This is pot roast season. So you could have a nice meat and potato pot roast item. We had that at $18. And if you did another great idea, a pot roast nacho.
Oh my gosh.
I've seen some, or even mac and cheese here with pot roast too. So a lot of great appetizer items out there too. We had that at a $15 pot roast nacho, using 8 ounces on the pot roast and 4 ounces on the nacho. 4.5 pounds of country style ribs. If you can get that out there and market that as a country style rib or a beef country style rib, we had those at $16 on a menu for an 8-ounce portion. I think that's a healthy amount right there. Yeah. Then we had a 1.5 pounds of the beef stew, which we would put at maybe a $6 mark, using 4 ounces in a stew. And just basing all those items that we pulled out of there, we had about $700 in sales based on the weight that came from that chuck roll and all the items that we were pulled out of there. You subtract your $100 that you paid for that one chuck roll, you're looking at over $600 in profit. Now, there are a few caveats to that. Obviously, we're not factoring in labor. We're not factoring in your sides that are going on that dish, so your food cost is going to go up. We're also not factoring in cooking loss. But I think we could all agree that pulling $600 out of one piece of meat is just absolutely phenomenal, and it really speaks to the profitability found in that chuck roll.
Yeah.
So that's essentially it. Any other last comments you had regarding this? I mean, I certainly want to eat after seeing all this.
Oh my gosh, I know. That's all I'm thinking about. And guys, really, we just challenge you to try it. Just get in a chuck roll and just see what you can do, see what you can make out of it. It's fun. It really is just fun to break down. It's not a huge cost. So really, if you guys have questions or want to learn more, please feel free to reach out to us directly. We are here to answer your questions. Follow us on Instagram, on Facebook, whatever have you. Just continue communicating. We want to help you as much as we can, and that's what we're here for.
Yeah, just give it a try.
Yeah, we would love to see you guys utilize this and put it into your operation today. And lastly, I just want to say, we're going to be doing another session like this in January. I think the date's January 19th. We're going to look at the top sirloin, another incredible cut that's got a lot of profitability based on the price. Email us your feedback. If you have any feedback, there's going to be an email coming out in the next couple of days. We would love to hear from you guys. If you have ideas on another session, we're definitely open to that. And on behalf of Certified Angus Beef, thank you guys all for being here. We greatly appreciate it and look forward to seeing you in the future, hopefully here at the Culinary Center one day. Take care.